All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be listening. Welcome to Fantasy Al Dente, the show that gives you your fantasy recipe. Amar, how we doing?
Doing great, man. Doing excellent. Ready for
Welcome
week
back.
11.
You love it. Yeah, Josh is not with us. He may actually join us later in the show, but for now, it's going to be me and Umar. So as we did last week, we're going to start it in this week with our DFS lineups. Um, I do have to mention I joined the fun last week, and as you can see, took the win. Took the win right off the bat. Your host knows what he's talking about sometimes, I guess. I'm not just all fluff. I'm not just a pair of headphones and a hat. I can actually add to the conversation. So, um, took the win, but let's get into our your lineup, Ummer, this week. Brought to you by DraftKings. Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and break it down.
Sure. Starting at quarterback, I got Carson Wentz versus the Saints. I mean, this is going to be a high scoring, lots of throwing. I mean, the Eagles running back situation is pretty tough right now. It's nobody's really separated themselves, so I expect lots of airing it out by Carson Wentz. Saints defense pretty porous. At running backs, I paid up pretty big for the running backs. I got David Johnson versus the Raiders. And Christian McCaffrey versus the Lions. Christian McCaffrey has been solid in these past couple of weeks. He's going to be a legit star this week. And David Johnson's playing the Raiders. Like I said, he's finally starting to turn it up, and he's got a great matchup in the Raiders this week. Wide receivers, I got Golden Tate versus the Saints. Head coach Doug Peterson has said he wants to involve Golden Tate more this week as opposed to last week when he was first getting acclimated. So I expect him to get a lot of target share this week against the Saints. Corey Davis versus the Colts. I think this matchup is actually suited to Corey Davis, and he really played well last week against New England. So I expect that to continue this week. And similar to David Johnson, I like Larry Fitzgerald versus the Raiders. I expect Josh Rosen to go to him early and often. Should be a good matchup for Larry Fitz. Tight end, I got Trey Burton versus the Vikings. The Vikings have a pretty good defense as far as the secondary is concerned, but this is where Trey Burton can utilize the middle of the field, possibly some red zone opportunities to get 4 or 5 receptions, possibly a score or two. We'll see how that goes, but I like him versus the Vikings. In the flex, I like Mark Ingram versus the Eagles. Where I don't like the Eagles running back situation, I like the Saints running back situation. So Alvin Kamara may move the ball down the field through the passing game, but come the red zone, I expect Mark Ingram to get a touchdown or two as soon as they get into that end zone. And for the defense, I expect the Carolina Panthers to rebound versus the Lions after that tough showing against Pittsburgh last week. So I think they'll totally shut down the Lions. And the Lions are just, they're a bit of a mess on the field anyways. So Panthers should have a really nice matchup this week.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. There's your lineup for Ummer. As I did last week, I'll do the same this week. I'm going to upload these all to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the socials, websites. You can take a look at that before these games kick off. I do have Josh's lineup right in front of me, as you can review on the screen. I won't break it down too much, but I at least list it off if you're driving or can't really read. He's got Roethlisberger versus the Jags, obviously coming off a killer week last week on Thursday Night Football, kind of rolling that wave, it sounds like. Peyton Barber versus the Giants. I won't break it down, but yep, that's who he has. Um, Ezekiel Elliott versus the Falcons. Don't overthink it. Sometimes you just get some star athletes on your roster. Michael Thomas versus the Eagles. He's got Corey Davis as well versus the Colts. Traquan Smith, so looking like saving some money there at the wide receiver position. Going big at the tight end with Travis Kelce versus the Rams on the Monday night matchup. And then he's got Alex Collins and his flex versus the Bengals. And just like you, got Carolina Panthers versus the Lions as his defense. All right. For the winner from last week, let's go to my lineup. I agree with you. I'm going with Carson Wentz. I think it's going to be a high octane game. Saints have the 32nd ranked defense against quarterbacks. So points are aplenty. Even though that defense has kind of improved, especially since week one, I think Wentz is still going to have a very solid game. I went heavy hitters at the running back position, so I spent a lot of money there. I think that Monday night game is going to be a shootout. High octane, a lot of points to be had. So I went Todd Gurley and Kareem Hunt. Basically, use my bankroll there. I think it's going to pay off for me, though. And I can hopefully get some production with some cheaper options down the line. At receiver, I got Sterling Shepard versus the Bucks. Bucks defense ain't stopping nobody, so anyone playing them each week, I'm down to start. Shepard had a touchdown last week. Look for him to repeat this week. Nelson Aguilar versus the Saints, kind of the same reason as Wentz, and same reason as pretty much my whole roster is going to be high-scoring games. Wentz going to spread the ball around. I like Alshon Jeffrey a lot this week. We can kind of go into that as we break down our starts and sits, but he was a little more expensive option in DFS, so Aguilar's what I could afford, and I still think he'll get some touches in there and should be able to get me double-digit points. Demaryius Thomas is entering his, I guess, third week, second game, because they had a bye last week, with the Texans. He was targeted twice on that opening drive in his first week with him, totaling like 2 receptions for 60 yards, added one more. I think he'll be a little more involved this week since he's learned the playbook a little more. And again, just another cheap option I could add, but I could totally see him getting, 6 to 8 targets or something like that. Tight end, here's a sleeper, Gerald Everett. Cooper Kupp goes down for the Rams. Big loss for them. Everett's kind of a guy they drafted 2 years ago, second round. Super, super athletic. Big target. We've kind of been waiting for him to break out. Finally had a touchdown last week. I expect him to get much more involved this week, especially because of the high score. Could see him even lining up in the slot or even on the outside. He's a tight end, but I could see him playing more little receiver since Cup went down. So could see him being a nice option, especially for only $2,600 in DFS. The flex, Golden Tate, another Eagle, another guy. So I went real heavy in 2 games almost. Just another guy in those high-scoring games. And finally, defense. I went Arizona against the Raiders. The Raiders' offense is just atrocious, and the Cardinals' defense has stepped up as of late. It looked good last week, even against Kansas City. So there you have it. There's the winning lineup back-to-back weeks.
We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. That we will. Bold, if you will. But yeah, so I'll upload that here in the next couple minutes or so if you want to take a look at that. But well, Amr, let's it's different, just the two of us. I don't know why, but let's jump
We've
right
done
in.
it before.
We've done it before, and we're not going to miss a beat. We're still going to give you great information, so it's great. I'm going to join in on the conversation a little more, but let's jump right in. We want to move a little faster since we did start a little later today. Kickoff's in about 50 minutes, so let's just jump into a couple quarterbacks you're loving this week.
Sure. News broke out. Joe Flacco's not playing this week. I like Lamar Jackson versus the Bengals. Quick fun fact: Bengals are one of 3 teams to surrender at least 30 points per game. So in a new game, not much tape on him. I expect him to do some damage against the Bengals. Another quarterback I like this week: Deshaun Watson versus the Redskins. Coming off the bye week, I think Watson should be, more familiar with Demaryius Thomas, and obviously DeAndre Hopkins should be, lethal as always. Redskins defense has not been playing as well last few weeks. And yeah, I like Deshaun Watson versus the Redskins, and also I like Cam Newton to have a rebound week versus the Lions.
There you have it. Interesting, Lamar Jackson on his first start. You're rolling with him. I'm thinking he's going to
I think they'll
obviously
have
he's going to
lots
get
of
some rushing.
RPO options. The skill players will be able to benefit from him as opposed to Joe Flacco's limited as just being a passer. So yeah, I like the dual threat ability of Lamar Jackson this week against the Bengals.
All right, let's see. I have 3 completely different guys, so that's kind of fun.
There you go.
As we mentioned, DFS, excuse me, Carson Wentz. He's my QB play of the week. I only included him. I think he's kind of a start every week, but in certain rosters, because he was injured to start the year, you may have drafted him later and have 2 quarterbacks very playable. So I'd roll with Wentz this week. Marcus Mariota. He's had 20-plus fantasy points in his last 2 outings. Has looked much improved. It looks like his hand finally has some good feeling in it, so he's throwing the ball a lot better, and he's playing against the 25th ranked defense against quarterbacks. So rolling with Mariota this week as well. And my bold start of the week, Case Keenum. Yeah.
Okay.
Boy, hey, if you're going Jackson, I'm going Keenum. Playing against the Chargers, coming off the bye week. I just think they'll be playing from behind in Los Angeles, and he's going to have 35, 40-plus targets. So just on volume alone, I think he can easily get up in that 250, 300-yard range and 2 touchdowns. So I'm not saying he's going to be the QB of the week, but if you're looking a little desperate on buys and he's probably available in 90% of leagues, you could stream him this week. I'll just start with Stits. I'll stick with myself. I have Phillip Rivers as a sit, sticking with that same game. I think the game plan for the Chargers this week, as most weeks, is a heavy dosage of Melvin Gordon. So I think, especially if they jump to an early lead like they have in weeks past, they hand the rock off. Rivers doesn't end up exploiting defenses as much. I got Andy Dalton as a sit as well. AJ Green not in the lineup again. We've kind of talked about throughout the show how he struggles a bit when Green is not out there. And also, I have Andrew Luck, another bold one. I just think I don't love his matchup. He's been the model of consistency for the last 5 weeks, averaging right about 20, 22 points a game, almost exactly, which is by no means bad, by no means is tremendous. Obviously, that's worthy of a start. But the Titans the last 2 weeks have held Prescott and Brady to 14.8 and 11.1 points respectively. So I see that another tough matchup there.
Not bad. Pretty bold choices there. I also have Andy Dalton versus the Ravens. During his last three games, Dalton's averaging 194 yards, one touchdown, and one pick. So those are not stellar numbers. And also throwing the fact that the Ravens are coming off a bye, they should be pretty solid on defense. I also have Kirk Cousins versus the Bears in the Sunday night matchup tonight. Bears defense has been lethal. I mean, we've been talking about this all season long. And although they may have to be forced to throw the ball more, I just anticipate Kirk Cousins making a few mistakes and turning the ball over, which the Bears can capitalize on. And so, if you can have another option besides Kirk Cousins, I know it's tough. There's 6 teams on a bye this week, but if you have another option, I'd go with somebody else instead of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Cousins, I mean, that's just a tough matchup against the Bears, so as always. But all right, I'll let you go ahead and jump into some running backs, my friend.
Sure. Already mentioned I like David Johnson versus the Raiders. It's almost any Arizona player against the Raiders this week, but
Yes.
David Johnson is finally getting unleashed. Byron Leftwich knows that this is the guy that moves the offense. He had close to 100 yards rushing. He also had touchdown both rushing and receiving, so he's definitely getting involved heavily. And as we said, the Raiders are just a complete garbage dumpster fire, whatever you want to call it. So David Johnson to take advantage. Because I like Lamar Jackson, I also like Alex Collins versus the Bengals. I know they have a bit of a running back by committee in Baltimore, but um, Alex Collins has been performing a little bit better. I think that competition has brought the best out of him. And with Lamar Jackson probably running more RPOs this week compared to previous weeks, Alex Collins should be able to benefit from that. And the Bengals defense has been pretty porous the last few weeks, so Alex Collins should take advantage. And Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis actually like them versus the Colts, where Dion Lewis will get more of the receiving yards and move the ball down the field. I expect Derrick Henry, similar to last week, as soon as they get into the red zone, he should pound it in possibly once, possibly twice. So Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis, those are guys that have been sort of absent the last few weeks that finally their their name is being called more often. So I like them versus the Colts this week.
Yep, I agree with you. I got David Johnson as well. Got Dion Lewis. I'm not going to break it down anymore. I also have Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay's been kind of the darling this year, and I think he's truly a good fantasy option now. No longer is he a stream start or a guy you plug and play. He is a absolute flex option and even an RB2 option. Um, I haven't heard the exact injury report yet, but Royce Freeman I know is still questionable. He may be a go, but he'll be limited at best, I think. So he's still the number one option. His last two games, Lindsey's gotten I think 18 and 17 carries respectively, plus a couple catches out of the backfield. So still has the heavy workload. So I like Lindsey again this week. For sits, I have Adrian Peterson. Um, he's still going to have the bulk of the carries as he's shown last week. 19 again, but just he hasn't. He kind of, I feel like at this point in his career, almost he's relying very heavily on chunk plays or breakout plays, and if he doesn't get that, he's not very productive, to say the least. So he was only able to compose about 7.9 points last week, even with those 19 carries. He's only has uh, couple games. I think he's bested 20 points only three times, and then after that, he has one game in double digits. So kind of just the inconsistency there. Um,
And we
Joe,
talked about this last week that Washington lost three starting offensive linemen. So that was one of the big reasons that Peterson is having a bit of a resurgent year. But without those three starting offensive linemen, he's not going to be as effective the rest of the season.
yeah, absolutely. Couldn't. Yeah, that's absolutely why. And they still came away with the win last week, but
Yeah.
definitely saw the struggle with those linemen going down. I also have Joe Mixon. Um, Same thing, just inconsistency, and I don't love the matchup being at Baltimore. Tough rushing defense there, and Baltimore is obviously looking to bounce back. So I don't love the matchup there. And another kind of bold one for you, Marlon Mack. Obviously, in some instances, you're going to have to start him. If you have other options, though, I'd roll with it. Uh, he's had two games of I think 26 and 29 points. His other three games, he's failed to even reach double digits. Um, so I just think with that kind of consistency with the matchup they're playing against Tennessee, who has a very good rush defense, I don't love the matchup. So if you have other options, roll with that.
Yeah, and I think you touched on this where coming into my sits, you said you like Philip Lindsay, so yeah. In addition to that, I don't like Royce Freeman versus the Chargers. I know he has been injured, but I mean, looking at his past 5 games, he has a total of 27 carries, 90 yards, and 1 touchdown. And as you know, a high-profile pick coming out of the draft, you expected him to have greater numbers than this, but just we're not seeing it right now. So maybe you need to look into next year to possibly him turning the corner, but this year it's not him. It's Philip Lindsay this year.
Yeah, well, and the hard thing
um,
with sorry to cut you off with Freeman,
sure.
it's not necessarily his ability or his running. It's just he's not being utilized in that offense right now. So even when he
Right.
was healthy, he just wasn't getting the amount of carries that I feel like he garners. But obviously in fantasy respects, that's why you're not going to play him. So
Exactly. I don't like on Johnson versus the Panthers. Panthers are ninth in rushing yards allowed, and like I said, I like the Panthers to rebound this week against the Lions. So after that showing against Pittsburgh last week, so don't like on Johnson. Another sit that I have is Tevin Coleman versus the Cowboys. Now I know Tevin Coleman had a bit of a rebound week last week, but I anticipate to be more of the passing game by Atlanta. Cowboys have been pretty good at shutting down the run, so I don't like Tevin Coleman this week. He may do all right, but not anything that's warranted as far as giving you serious points on your fantasy roster this week.
yeah, um, I tend to agree with that. Excuse me as well. For wide receivers, go for it. I'll let you start with just do your starts and sits. I'll let you break them both down real quick.
All right, sounds good. So where you like Gerald Everett as a tight end as a sleeper, I actually like Josh Reynolds as a sleeper wide receiver to take the place of Cooper Kupp. Um, we saw that when Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp were hurt a few weeks ago, that Josh Reynolds was getting more involved, running more routes. He wasn't as effective as people were hoping, but I think finally now that Cooper Kupp is out for the entire year, he'll finally get more involvement. Yeah, the Rams run lots of three wide receiver sets, so he will get involvement, especially in a very high scoring game versus the Chiefs. He should get possibly a score, maybe not that many receptions, but I like Josh Reynolds this week. I also like Amari Cooper versus the Falcons. If you look at his stats when he was with the Raiders, 7 games, he had 5 games with less than 5 points. But in his 2 games with the Cowboys, he's had double digits in both. So definitely the Cowboys have an actual number one receiver to throw to. They'll force feed him if they need to in a high scoring game that I anticipate. Mark Cooper will definitely get fed the ball a lot. As mentioned, I like Larry Fitzgerald versus the Raiders. I like Demarius Thomas versus the Redskins. I expect him to play a good second fiddle to DeAndre Hopkins for the rest of the season going forward. And I also like Anthony Miller versus the Vikings. But on the flip side, going into my sits, I don't like Allen Robinson versus the Vikings. I know he had a sensational week against Detroit last week, but the Vikings have actually been pretty good at shutting down their number one receivers that they're facing. So Allen Robinson, I don't expect him to have a very good game, whereas the supplemental receivers, Trey Burton, which I'll get to later in the show, and Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel, they'll get more involvement compared to Allen Robinson. Um, as mentioned, Darius Slay did not play last week, but he is playing this week. So I don't anticipate Devin Funchess having a very good game this week. So I'm sitting him. Mohamed Sanu versus the Cowboys. He's just been getting less involvement in that passing offense compared to Calvin Ridley and, of course, Julio Jones. Any Bengals receiver versus the Ravens. I mean, you could probably uh, voice your opinion for Tyler Boyd. He may get force fed and he will get, pretty decent numbers. But I mean, Ryan, I'll pay you $50 if you can name me another Bengals receiver besides John Ross and Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, I'm not gonna even try to attempt that. I'm sure I could rack my brain and think of it, but yeah, I'll hold on to my 50.
So yeah, just the Ravens should have a very good week this week. They're playing at home, and the Bengals' passing offense has, unfortunately, without AJ Green, he should be coming back within the next week or two. But until then, avoid the Bengals' passing offense if you can.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially against like you mentioned against that Baltimore D, in Baltimore, I believe as well.
Yeah,
Um,
in Baltimore.
for me, Alshon Jeffrey, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I just like almost anyone in that game, that Saints Eagles game. But I think since Jeffrey's return from injury in Week 5, he's kind of been a bit consistent up and down. But they playing against the 32nd ranked defense against receivers, so I just like the matchup there. And I think with Wentz to him, I think we could see some good production there. While I don't like Andrew Luck this week, I do like T.Y. Hilton. I feel like he's been a bit resurged since coming back. He's been a bit unproductive as of late, but I look for that to change just with Tennessee ranking as good as they do against the run and against quarterbacks. But they are, a little leaky in the secondary, and I think he can exploit that a little bit. Um, so I think he can have a productive week. My start of the week is Robert Woods. I mean, he's a pretty much everyday play at this point. I think he's a top 10 receiver, kind of surprising people. But obviously, with the loss to Cooper Cup, he's going to see even more production. And yeah, love anyone in that Rams Chiefs game. So we don't need to go into that much more. For my sits, I have Keenan Allen for the Chargers. The Broncos have actually shut down, other than DeAndre Hopkins in their last game, they've done a pretty good job of shutting down number one receivers. Tyreek Hill has 18 points combined in 2 games against the Broncos, and he's your number one fantasy receiver. They held a few other guys in check as well. Brandon Cooks had 6.3 points against them a couple weeks back, so I like them shutting down Keenan Allen while he may be shut down. Tyrell Williams might have a good game. We don't know for sure, but I like Keenan Allen as a sit this week. Calvin Ridley is a sit for me as well. I feel like he had that one 37-point game, and everyone all of a sudden thought he was an every week start. But he's still he's a tremendous rookie, tremendous talent. I think he's going to be one of the good ones for a long time to come. Love his route running ability, his catching ability, his nose for the end zone. But I don't like his matchup this week, and I think he's more of a matchup friendly start than he is an every week start. So I would keep him on your bench this week. And then my bold sit of the week, Juju Smith-Schuster.
Ooh,
Yeah, he's been great. He's been the darling, I think, this year. Came on the scene last year as a rookie and kind of took the league by storm. This year, he's backed that up by being extremely consistent. I think he's a top 15 receiver overall. But as of late, his production, and I don't want to discount him for this, but his production has been very precedent. He's been very touchdown reliant and big play reliant. I think last week he had 3 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, that gives you great fantasy points, but that's not the production that you like seeing, especially against this Jacksonville defense that they're going to go up against. So if he doesn't hit the big play, he's a 6, 8, 9 point guy, and I see that happening this week in that game. So I'm going to sit Juju Smith-Schuster. Bold. I feel like a lot of
very
bold
bold.
ones this week. Going, yeah. I got a lot of hate
Go
for
big
it
or go
too.
home, man. I like it.
I've got a lot of hate for these bold starts and sits, but hey, we'll see when it happens. I feel like what I love about the fantasy community is it's a very knowledgeable community for one. People
Hmm.
keep you in check, but what always I find kind of interesting is if you list a obvious start, you get hate for it being an obvious start. But if you
Right,
list a bold sit, you get hate for being a bold sit. And
right.
so it's like can't win either way. So we're just gonna run with it. In baseball, if you bat 300, you're a Hall of Famer. So if I can hit 50%, I'm due for the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that being said, tight ends. I'm gonna go for it.
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, I like Trey Burton versus the Vikings, where the Vikings may be able to shut down the opposing receivers for the Bears. I think Trey Burton will be able to capitalize on that, and he'll get force fed for sure. Um, Ryan Ryan Fitzpatrick will be hitting OJ Howard pretty much early and often versus the Giants, so I like OJ Howard this week. And I also like Austin Hooper versus the Cowboys. So Julio Jones, Austin Hooper, and I like Calvin Ridley this week as opposed to Ryan's thoughts there. But yeah, I think they'll be the main 3 targets this week for Matt Ryan, and they both should see good numbers. Jumping into my sits, I don't like Jordan Reed versus the Texans. I know that a healthy Jordan Reed is usually a sign that he'll do well, but he's been healthy this entire year and he hasn't been producing. So I don't know what's going on with Jordan Reed. So I would sit him this week versus the Texans. Texans have a pretty strong defense. Kyle Rudolph, I mean, we've talked about him for a couple weeks now, where just he is not the red zone monster that we've been anticipating. He is good for like maybe 6, 7, maybe 8 points at the most, but nothing too point heavy for him as far as getting you big points for your fantasy roster. So sit him versus the Bears, and we already talked about it. Sit any Bengals players that you have. So even with the loss of AJ Green, you think CJ Uzuma, the tight end for the Bengals, would be more involved. He may be, but I don't anticipate good numbers for him. So sit him if you have him.
Yeah. My starts are pretty much the same as yours. I got OJ Howard. Not going to go into that. Austin Hooper. Love Austin Hooper too. He's been pretty good this year. Had a really good week last week. And then, as I mentioned earlier, my bold start when I did DFS, Gerald Everett. So if you're really desperate and need someone that's on a buy, he's absolutely going to be available. Go stream him this week. And hopefully it pays off for you. To my sits, I agree with you, Jordan Howard. I think what's so fascinating to me about Jordan Howard is Alex Smith
Jordan
and
Reed.
Jordan
Jordan
Reed.
Reed.
Sorry, Jordan Howard. Yeah, it's a running back. Jordan Reed. What's so fascinating to me about Jordan Reed is, when Alex Smith was in Kansas City, there was an entire season, if you remember, where there was not a touchdown to a receiver. He only threw
Yeah,
touchdowns to running backs and tight ends.
running backs and
Travis
tight ends. Yeah.
Travis Kelsey, 8, was absolutely phenomenal. So
Hmm.
you'd think Alex Smith going to Washington, all of a sudden, it's going to not only improve Jordan Reed, but like double his production, and it's been the exact
Yeah.
opposite effect. So yeah, that's just been interesting to me. But he, yeah, has not been used. Stay away from him. I feel like we mention every week. Evan Ingram, though, at this point, he's just a big name that everyone likes to keep saying. But he's pretty much droppable. He's a 24th ranked tight end in a field that
Yeah.
has been really bad this year. I mean, aside from the
Right.
top even two, you can't even almost say Gronk anymore just because he's been hurt so much.
Yeah, that's
Outside
true.
outside of Ertz and Kelsey, there's not a lot of production at the tight end position, or at
Hey,
least
come on, man.
consistent.
Throw some love to Kittle, man.
Kittle, yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. We'll give some love to Kittle. But outside of those top three, four guys, it's just an inconsistent. And Ingram's ranked 24th on that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not starting him the rest of the season. I don't think.
No,
Uh,
sophomore slump for that guy for sure.
yeah, I think just in reality, he's just anyone that owns Ingram, especially if you're in a dynasty, you're just praying for a quarterback change here soon, and hopefully they can get him the rock more. Jared Cook, I have as a sit as well.
Yeah.
Um, don't love the matchup against Arizona, and that offense just continues to sputter. And yeah, we kind of talked about that earlier. My last one, and this is a lot of people were shocked last week, but Eric Ebron I have as a sit this week. Obviously, comes off a monster week with 3 touchdowns, but he only had 3 receptions. If you look at their snap to snap ratio between him and Jack Doyle, just last game, Doyle had 48 snaps with 3 targets. Ebron had 21 snaps with 3 targets and 3 touchdowns. So obviously tremendous week, but when you look at that, it's not going to hold up with that kind of snap production and how much they're on the field. So I just think his utilization is continuing to go down, and he is a very touchdown dependent start, which I never love. So I'm going with a sit for Ebron this week. See if it pays out.
You
Um,
know, we always put him in the sick column, Ryan, and for some reason he always proves us wrong. So that's why I was wary against putting him in the
yeah,
sick column this week. But I like your bold move. It may pay off for you. I know that Jack Doyle is the main guy in that offense, and he was hurt. That's why Eric Ebron has been able to play the season that he's been playing so far. But yeah, it's been he's been turning a lot of heads this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes off again this week too.
yeah. If they run another damn jet sweep to him on the 10 yard line, then he'll be a start the rest of the year. Then I'll just call it. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if they're using him that much in the red zone, go for it. I just don't like his touchdown dependency. But hey,
No, I
he
agree.
keeps
I
proving us
agree.
wrong. I believe he's the surprisingly, I believe he is the third ranked tight end right
I
now.
think so. Yeah.
Pretty sure he
Definite
is.
top five. I don't know if he's third. I think Kittle is actually third. He might be fourth, or that could be switched around. But yeah, definitely top five
Yeah,
for sure.
which is, I mean, obviously after last week that helps certainly because of like we
Yeah.
mentioned the poor pool in last week. I believe he had like 30 points, so that's gonna
Yeah.
rocket you up the scoreboard. But hey, to each their own. Um, defenses, how we do this, we just break two down we like, two down we don't like. We don't really have to go into much detail. I like Arizona and I like Pittsburgh this week. I do not like Jacksonville and I do not like Philadelphia.
Nice. I also like Arizona. I like Carolina, as mentioned. I like Baltimore versus the Bengals. Defenses I don't like. Pretty much any defense that's going to be high scoring. So Eagles, Saints, Chiefs, Rams, Giants, Bucks. Those are all defense I'm sitting. Redskins versus the Texans, and also Cowboys versus the Falcons.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting starting the year. The Rams defense was probably when it comes to picking defenses, was probably a highly sought after defense, and they are almost droppable at this point with how much they've struggled and given up a lot of points. And um, definitely do not start them this week. I mean, you may want to hang on to them, but yeah, against the Chiefs, you're not going to want to start them.
So I think the Rams still have a good fantasy defense. The problem is just they've been playing such great offenses where they played New Orleans and then now they're playing Kansas City. So it's like it's more of those things where it's just the offense is just so good that it can make a defense look bad almost sort of thing. So the Rams still have to play the Niners again later in the season. I think they still have to play Arizona, I believe. So there's still some good matchups for the Rams defense. So I wouldn't say droppable, but I definitely see where you're coming from. Where it's just like there have been a lot of weeks where just they've been getting ripped apart, and it's sort of surprising seeing all the offseason additions that they made over the offseason.
Yeah, yeah, that is true though. That you have some very friendly matchups down the stretch, so that should come into play. Well, look at us. We rolled through that quick this week.
Yeah, we did.
That was impressive. That was impressive. Well, let's get into a couple questions, shall we?
Sure, let's do it.
I'm just you're the main man, so I'm just gonna ask you. So you're gonna be on the spot for all of them. Eli or Mariota?
Oh, that's a tough one. I probably have to go with Mariota in that case because I like his running ability as well. And I also like the matchup against the Colts a little bit better than Eli's fluke good game against the Niners last week.
And
So yeah, I'd
last,
probably go with Mariota.
yeah, and Eli also had that last minute touchdown as well, which obviously helps in fantasy respects. Chris Godwin or John Brown, standard league.
I actually like John Brown a lot. That's one guy that, with Lamar Jackson starting this week, I expect him to, utilize the deep ball. Like I said, lots of RPOs, possibly some play action, move him out of the pocket. And John Brown as a deep threat is going to be solid. So yeah, I actually like John Brown a lot this week.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun game to watch just to see Jackson, making his debut and seeing how he handles that. Um, Another guy from that game, John Ross or Willie Snead, PPR. If you're
Can I
having to
say
start those
neither?
two, if you're having to start those, if you're having to
Can I
start
say
those two
neither?
guys, you must be in like a 16 team league or something.
I guess I would probably have to say Willie Snead just because of just utilization. Because, like I said, I don't think the Bengals offense, besides that fluke score that John Ross had last week, he had a pretty dud of a game. He has not been a good supplemental piece to both AJ Green and Tyler Boyd,
Yeah,
and then
I
now
think that was his
without
only.
AJ Green.
I think that was his only reception. Was that touchdown, if I remember correctly?
I think he might have had one additional one, but yeah, without that touchdown reception, he had a pretty bad game. So yeah, based on just the options, I'd probably say Willie Snead. But yeah, like I said, if you can go with neither, that'd probably be better.
Yeah, I. That must be like a 16 to 20 team league if those are your two options right now.
Exactly.
Um, okay, PPR, Mark Ingram or Philip Lindsay?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I probably have to say Philip Lindsay. Actually, I think, like I said, Alvin Kamara will get more of the touches in the passing game, a little bit in the running game as well. Whereas Mark Ingram will probably get utilized a lot in the red zone. Whereas Philip Lindsay, I mean, we talked about it. Royce Freeman has just not been utilized in that offense, so he's just their all-purpose back. So Philip Lindsay in those two options.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. I think Lindsay's your more guaranteed touches, whereas Ingram's more of that boom or bust. Obviously, we saw the boom last week, and then we saw the bust 2 weeks before that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right, pick one. We got four names here: Cortland Sutton, Larry Fitzgerald, Deshaun Jackson, or John Brown.
Is this PPR or standard?
He didn't say. Let's just go with PPR.
Okay. Okay. I'd probably go with Larry Fitzgerald just based on the matchup. And like I said, Byron Leftwich he's utilizing his star players more, and he knows that Larry Fitzgerald is Larry Legend for a reason, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I like Larry Fitzgerald out of those four options.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and as we mentioned earlier, going against Oakland, why
Hmm.
not? I like that better. And
Yeah.
Sutton's going to go against Casey Hayward in L.A. Um,
Yeah.
Jackson's your boomer bust, and John Brown we do like, but I think
Yeah.
Fitzgerald, yeah, has a little more upside.
John Brown's still a little bit risky because of Lamar Jackson, but I do like his potential. He has very high ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Larry Fitzgerald is the model of consistency, so yeah, I like him more.
Agreed. Let's see here. We kind of already went into that ourselves. Okay, Golden Tate or Josh Reynolds, PPR.
Oh, that's actually a good one.
Yeah, interesting.
As mentioned, Doug Peterson said he wants to involve Golden Tate more this week compared to last week. Just wanted to get him more acclimated last week, and now he's definitely going to get a lot more targets. The only thing is just because they have so many options in Philadelphia, I don't know how successful that will be. Obviously, we're both starting him in our DFS lineup, so we both think he's going to do pretty well. Um, so yeah, I think I actually like Golden Tate more than Josh Reynolds, just based on utilization in that offense again, once again.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that as well. Okay, another quarterback question for you: Cam Newton or Carson Wentz?
Cam Newton. I think just the Lions' defense has been pretty poor. That Cam Newton's just gonna run amok on them.
Yeah, I like Carson Wentz actually, but I think you're solid either way. If those are your two quarterback
Yeah, no,
options,
I agree. Whereas
start one
I
and be
don't like
happy.
Willie Snead or well, can't believe the I can't remember the other one. John Ross or Willie Snead. I like both of these options.
Yeah, I think
Either
you're.
way, I think yours should be all right.
I think you're set up pretty well going, especially two very good quarterbacks and going against the Lions or the Saints.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Uh, Breeze or Wentz, I think same thing. Either way, you're good. I think I would like Wentz a little better than Breeze, but to each their own.
Since you're playing at home, I actually would prefer Breeze, but yeah,
There you go.
either option is good.
Agree to disagree. All right, choose two standard. Keenan
Standard,
Al-
okay.
Keenan Allen, Alshon Jeffrey, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Kenny Galladay, or Ty or T. Sorry, okay, let me start over. Keenan Allen. They're like multiple names. They're kind of spelled weird. Keenan
Gotcha.
Allen, Alshon Jeffrey, T.Y. Hilton,
Uh-huh.
Juju, Kenny Galladay. So five
Okay.
names. Choose two.
Standard league. Um, Probably go with Ty and Alshon.
Yep, those are my
I
two.
think Ty should probably be able to hit a home run ball, so that'll get him into the end zone. Probably get you a lot of good points there. And Alshon, I think, like I said, he's the main guy in that offense. I know Zach Ertz had a great game last week, but with all those options, I think Alshon should see the end zone this week for sure too.
Yep, those are the two I agree. I like Kenny Galladay as well.
I
As
think he'll get force fed because Marvin Jones is out this week,
correct.
but yeah, I think he will get force fed, so I wouldn't be surprised if he sees the end zone as well. But it's a very risky play.
Yeah. So I like the two Ty and Alshon. Um, okay, let's get a few more in here, and then we will wrap up Fantasy Al Dente. All right, pick two. 0.5 PPR. So
Okay.
PPR essentially. Chris Godwin, who is questionable but should play.
He is going to play, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's questionable. Yeah.
Eckler, Kiki Kute, or Tyrell Williams. Another one where must be a deep league. Must be a deep league. Can you even repeat
Is
them?
it pick two, right?
Pick two.
I'd probably go with Kute and run the options by me again.
Yeah, Chris Godwin, Aaron Eckler, Kiki Kute, or Tyrell Williams.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Kute and Tyrell Williams. I think both of those guys should be a home run threat for sure. So yeah, I like their potential a little bit more compared to Eckler and Godwin.
Yeah. Um. Okay, here's another one where I think this person needs to be hitting the waiver wire. But tight end question, 1 point PPR: Kyle Rudolph or Mark Andrews.
Oh gosh. Um, Probably just because of his name, I'd probably go with Kyle Rudolph because Mark Andrews. I know he's been more involved in that Baltimore offense, but and a young quarterback's best friend is his tight end, but they have almost like a tight end by committee situation
Yeah,
with
Hayden
Baltimore.
Hurst is
Like Mark
healthy again.
Andrews, Hayden Hurst, Max Williams. I mean, they have so many guys there, so I'd probably rely more on Kyle Rudolph, or he's the main guy there. So.
Yeah, I agree. But if you can, just hit that waiver wire or something. Even though it's 20 minutes before kickoff, you can probably pick up Gerald
You can
Everett.
find Gerald Everett. Yeah, exactly. I was about to say.
Give me some Gerald Everett. I'm high on him this week. We're gonna talk next week, and I'm either gonna look like the biggest idiot or a genius. So we'll see what happens.
It's true. We'll see what happens.
I'm excited for that. Okay, let's do two more. Michael Gallup or Kiki Kute, standard.
Standard, I'd probably go with Gallup in that situation.
Okay. Um, pick three, and this will be our last one of the day. So half point PPR. Pick
Okay.
three. I'm gonna drop you five names: Larry Fitz, Cortland Sutton, Trey Burton, Theo Riddick, Josh Reynolds.
Reynolds, Fitzgerald, and Burton.
There you go. Okay, so we're going one tight end, two receivers. Um, yeah, I think who are the other two? Riddick, who has had a very down year compared to last, and Sutton, who has a tough matchup. Yep, I like those three as well.
Riddick has just not been involved in the offense at all. It's been on Johnson since he's emerged. He's been the number one guy there.
As
They
he should
still
be.
use a little bit of LeGarrette Blunt, but yeah, Riddick has just been the ghost in that backfield for sure.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Riddick, but as it
Yeah,
should be, Johnson should be the one getting utilized, and he's looked great this year, and look forward to him in the future. So, all right, well, there you have it. I think we touched on about everything. Anything else you want to add? Is there any injuries you wanted that are surprising I want to throw out. We didn't really go over injuries this week, but there was no real big ones other than obviously like AJ Green and Joe Flacco.
Yeah. I know people are avoiding Raiders players in general, but both Jordy Nelson and Martavis Bryant are out this week, so that's more of a reason why I like the Cardinals defense, and also more of a reason why I like the Cardinals overall to really steamroll the Raiders, where it's just they'll just be so limited in the offensive aspect for the Raiders. That's what I'm saying. So Arizona will have lots of opportunities to score. Um, and yeah, it'll just be easy for the Arizona Cardinals defense to prevent them from doing anything anyways.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you there. Before you go, did you see that report this morning? I don't know how truthful it is about the Browns interested in Condoleezza Rice as their next head coach.
I did see that. That was very interesting.
I don't know
She
if
would
that
be
was
the
clickbait or actual some validity to that. I've heard she's a great football mind, but it just
Yeah,
seems
she's been super involved. I know in the past, and obviously whenever they have these not winter meetings, that's baseball. Just general
spring
manager
meetings.
meetings
Hmm.
and owners meetings and things like that. She has been involved for sure, and I think she was also helping them early on, like when they had the whole regime with like Sashi Brown, and this was like about 5 or 6 years ago. She was actually involved with some of their decisions as well. I mean,
Hmm.
kind of like as a I don't know, just like a head you could bounce your ideas off of sort of thing. So it's not too surprising, but yeah, that would be pretty awesome because she'd be the first woman to be considered for a head coaching position in the NFL in NFL history.
I
So
think just a coaching position in the NFL. Period.
yeah,
Some of the other
yeah,
leagues we've seen women finally break through, but yeah, the NFL is not one of them. So that would be, and I mean, being at Stanford, she's got connections with David
hmm
Shaw, so I'm sure she's done some things there. But I just read it and I was like, is this just wanting me to click on it? Like, is there any validity to this whatsoever? But we'll see. Another coaching news: it came out too that Gary Kubiak could possibly be on the sidelines again for the Broncos next year. I don't know how we'll see about that, but I think it would be more in the offensive coordinator role, not necessarily head coaching role. But
well, just going back to that Browns position, there's actually deep rumors that Jim Harbaugh may come back there, as well as newly retired Bruce Arians said
hmm
that the only job he would come back for is the Cleveland Browns job. So those are, three interesting names there: Condoleezza Rice, Jim Harbaugh, and Bruce Arians. So we'll see what happens in
that's
the
a
offseason for
that's
the
a power
Browns. I
play. Get
mean,
them all three. Get them all three, Cleveland.
they could use all three, honestly.
Me on our syndicate podcast, the coach and the Don. Me and Talon were talking about the Browns, and that roster is very appealing, and the fact that they have their
Yeah.
franchise quarterback. So if you're a coach at the end of this year and there's say 4 to 5 vacancies, I think that's the most attractive, mainly
hmm
because you have your quarterback for the next 15 years in Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. The only problem though is that whoever the new head coach comes in, if they don't like Baker Mayfield, then that could cause problems. But
Right, I would hope
I,
they
I don't
wouldn't.
think I don't think you're taking that job unless you do like Baker Mayfield.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
I would hope you're not taking it if you don't like your starting quarterback because that's not going to
exactly.
change. Um, great. Well, there you have it. We are 15 minutes to kickoff. I'm going to go ahead and upload those DFS lineup cards real quick if anyone wants to take a look at those. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks as always. Pleasure.
Great two-man show this week. Everybody, stay safe out there if you're on the West Coast with all those fires. Try not to go outside too much if you can avoid it. But yeah, have a good week 11,
Yeah,
guys.
absolutely. Thoughts and prayers for those and for all the first responders. And kind of cool how the Rams game giving away thousands of tickets to
Yeah.
first responders
hmm
on Monday night. So good for them. But thanks everyone. Enjoy your Sunday. Josh will be back with us next week, so we'll be back to a 3-man crew. But enjoy your week. We'll talk to you soon. Good luck in all
All
your
right.
fantasy lineups.
Take care, guys.